I have been trying to get together a video to show you how to do this beautiful scene. I've painted it in the past several times, but for some reason I just kept coming up with a mess each time I painted it. So I wanted to show you the process I've been through. You might learn something about having to redo paintings in the process. So this is, there's a long branch down here. It divides. I'm going to change the painting around somewhat because I don't want to exactly copy the composition of this other person's photograph. That's invading their copyright. So I'm going to put this elbow here up under the nest as if it's supporting it. And I'll arrange the leaves the way I want to. Okay, so this was the first version that I did. And the idea was that I did the background painting, and then I did the nest near the end of the painting and pulled it with palette knives, pulled this out. But I'm not happy with the way it looks. There are, as usual, there are some pieces of the painting that are just fine, but others are not. And by the way, all these black speckles, if you can see them, I splattered at some point. You can get rid of those usually with a razor blade, sharp, straight razor blade, and just do your best to just kind of pick it off. Pick as much pigment as possible off. Keep it kind of flat. Don't dig into the paper any more than you have to. And then you should be able to blend that in to your green there, if you didn't tear the paper up too much. All right, so this was a flop in my opinion. And I used a green in this painting called olive green, which you don't have yet. So I decided between this being a flop, this out here is done by a brush, but this, it just doesn't look like a nest. So between that and the fact that I used a different green from the one you have on your palettes, I decided to redo it. And the second attempt was this. So you see how I have the limb changed around. This, the masking on this painting was done in an unusual way, one that I don't use very often anyway, which is to cut masking tape up into slivers and just kind of lay them down there in different arrangements and paint around that, and then remove it. This painting and the coloring uses only the paints that you have in your palette. It's okay, but I'm not thrilled with it, and I wanted to be kind of thrilled with it. So, now this looks like a mess, but what I'm doing here is I've got first step was in all of these paintings is to put a wash of yellow green in the background. I may have gotten it a little too strong in this painting, I don't know. But the others, this is a yellow, it's a very soft yellow, and this is a soft, you can see the blue in this one, which was cerulean blue. And the colors that I'm going for in this particular painting, I worked out a palette swatch here is the gold, quinacridone gold, cerulean, a little bit of Hansa, yellow, and then also I've got ultramarine blue in here, which makes a terrific, ultramarine blue and the gold make a terrific green, all kinds of granulation, which is very suitable for these rough-looking grape leaves. The leaves actually are, in my opinion, are the center point of the painting in most cases. I just love grape leaves, the look of them. They have a shape that is quite, yeah. It's just a sec, I'll find a pencil. There we go. It comes down. The top of it tends to look like this, and the shape of it is basically heart-shaped. And it has little jagged edges all along. But it also has these, these indentation. There's a word for that. But I'm not a botanist. And then it has the wonderful center, especially at the top here, center veins in it. And you can see what in the painting, this one is like that. See this little cut in that leaf? I don't know if that is the way it's shaped or if something bit into it. There's another one with a bite out of it. And notice that these leaves range from kind of a medium dark to quite a dark color in the photograph. The grapes themselves are, for the most part, hiding behind other things. So they'll be kind of added in there too. And then also I want you to notice how rough the bark is on the grapevine itself. Just very dark. It comes up here. Okay, that was a field trip. So the first thing I did for this was to get probably a too bright yellow in the background. I just coated the whole thing, got it wet, and used a nice big round brush to paint it in, and then came back, double checked my tape all the way around, make sure it's still holding. And I avoided the center area here where we want to be able to mask it off and have it come up white afterwards as much as possible. Second step was to draw my lines on. And you may notice that I used a little pencil on what's going to be gray. But I've used a watercolor pencil to do my lines in this. I'm using watercolor pencils for my line work more and more all the time. They're just perfect because they disappear with the painting. They add to the color of the item. And especially when you're doing like complicated florals, you don't want to have to go back and erase those pencil lines every 10 minutes so they don't show through the very light colored flowers. Okay. Then I put, after that was totally dry, the background, I put the pencil lines down, and then I masked off with regular masking fluid. And I hope it looks more like a nest this time around. Okay, so my next job is to start painting these leaves in, get them looking like leaves. I also, by the way, masked off these grapes, so they will be this color when I pick the masking fluid up. But we should still have that watercolor line around them. Have some assistance from the watercolor. Okay, so remember that the leaves are a combination of this gold color and the ultramarine blue. So even though it looks terribly orange, it should calm down in time. Maybe I should paint this leaf first. I think I'll do that. So I have pre-mixed some, well, from the last painting I did, pre-mixed some of the darker green. It's not green. Yeah. You know, sometimes it's not my fault watercolor has a mind of its own. I don't like that color, especially next to that orange. So I'm going to mix a new batch of ultramarine blue and the quinacridone gold. Get quite a bit of it going because that is it's a very nice green. It should be more gold than ultramarine. Ultramarine's a very takeover kind of color. That's more like it. Now just water that down. Very often the answer to problems is add water. So I have that color on my brush. I might as well go ahead and do this one too. See how the pencil picks up and joins the paint. And when I paint behind these leaves, I will be careful to put more lobes. That's the word I was missing. That's a lobe. I'll try to put more of those jagged edges, emphasize that in some of the leaves. Don't have to do them all necessarily. And because this leaf here is under the bright orange leaf, the pumpkin leaf, we can make it a little bit darker. So I'm going to get a little bit more of the ultramarine blue and put it under here where the shade would be thrown, shadow would be thrown. See how it granulates? Isn't that gorgeous? I'll try and get some of those zigzags in now. A lot of painters, when they do floral subjects or fruit like this, will kind of ignore the leaves. But in a fruit tree in particular, and with many flowers, you see a whole lot more of the leaf than you do the flower itself. The flower is kind of an accent. It's interesting, but if you don't get the leaves right, you don't got nothing. Okay. Now we'll go over to, while those two are drying, we'll go pick on this leaf here. And I want this to be fairly light colored because this under here will be dark. If you decide to go to mixed greens that they're called convenience colors. In other words, instead of mixing it from blues and yellows. That olive green is a very nice color to use, to go to. Cheap Joe's has a good version. It's a mixed color, as I say. Usually they use phthalo green in it, which is almost too intense a color to use straight. It's kind of a takeover color. So they'll mix phthalo green with, I'm using some knife work, obviously. Once this is done, you don't retouch them. I mean, you can retouch the leaf when it's totally dry, but those lines that are in there are there to stay. Okay. Now, I guess that maybe do a leaf back in here, whatever. Maybe do some of the background leaves with, and use a lighter, more of a Hansa green in this, which would be Hansa, usually Hansa and cerulean. So that would blend in with the background there. We just get them established in the background. I think I'll get some dark green in there. What green? That's brown. Let's see. Try some cerulean. I'm going to add cerulean. This is recycling paint. Okay. And here's another leaf-like shape. I think I'll just leave it the way it is. It looks pretty good. I evidently put that in when I first painted some leaves at the same time as that I was masking off. And I think I want to put a little darker over here because those leaves are, this leaf is behind the grapes and it's going to, they need to stand out in relief from that. Otherwise they'll just disappear. Now I'm happier with the colors. I still have to paint this leaf. So let me do that. So I want it to be that same mix of gold and so on, but I don't want it to be very dark. So let's see if I can actually get that done. When these things are drier, I'll put a darker shadow underneath that one leaf there. So I'm trying to make a background for the painting that is not going to overwhelm the nest. I want people to see the nest as what it is, and still, of course, enjoy the grapes around it. So I think I'll leave it alone at this point. And let it dry. We'll come back and mess around with it some more. Okay. While you were gone, I put some lines in there. I'm going to go ahead, we still have the masking fluid in place, but I need to go ahead and do this the grapevine itself. And that'll be a mix. I'll start with sepia and, whoa, that's ultramarine. I didn't mean to do that. There's sepia. And this knuckle here is kind of knobbly. And the grapes are still masked off, so I can just whiz right over the top of them. And this down here. And it'd be good to have a dry brush here, actually. Why don't I dry this out just a bit? Then I'm going to put a little cerulean in it instead of ultramarine, because the cerulean blends with the brown to make a nice gray, and it's kind of a gray color there. There's a lot of cerulean in the rest of the painting anyway. So. And then we have it up here, which is important. It kind of ties the whole painting together. It has the natural movement here. Okay. Since I have a nice dry, skinny, pointed brush, I just take advantage of it there. Now, I want my flat knife. I have one that's curved. It does a lot of good things, but I want this one has to be flat. I'll just scrape it along there and make it look all old and ruggedy. Actually, the edge of this could be used to paint quite a bit too. It's got paint on the back of it, so you can do all kinds of things with these knives. Certainly add interest. We can always go back through and darken this later if we want it darker. And I think I will want this a little bit darker. Let's just go ahead and put more. Put a little swirling up there too. Okay, now that's all we can do. All we should do until we take that masking fluid up, and it just has to dry at its own rate. Nothing much you can do about that. So while you were sleeping, I took the masking fluid off the straw and off the grapes. So we're ready to paint. The straw needs to be a soft yellow, and then there's black touches behind it. So I'll go ahead and paint what's white now a very soft yellow, and come back later when that's dry to get some of these pokes and squares of a darker brown in behind it to emphasize it. It's dark now, so I don't have to do every little bit, but we'll want some extra darkness behind it probably. So to get that color of those straws, I'm going to be very careful this time and get quinacridone gold in my little mixing tray here, and some sepia. And I'm just using a very light touch of that. Could use almost any brush for this.
Slap it in wet with your palette knife.
Oh, I see. Okay. Get a little too wild and crazy here. So this is a toned down version of Quin Gold. Maybe put a little bit more sepia in there even. I'm beginning, if you want to buy more colors, I would suggest yellow ochre or yellow or gold ochre or sienna, light sienna, one of those colors. They're all earth tones, just like the sepia is an earth tone. They have varieties in their colors. And they have some very good pale brownish yellow colors. And usually they're the least expensive of all the colors. They're just made out of dirt. So I'm not going to be too careful here, just scoot it around. If some little bits of white show, so what? That's fine. Don't want it too dark. Of course, it will dry lighter. Keep your brush wet, keep your hand moving, and don't get too scared of this part of the process. I'm using a size 6 here. Could be a 4. Now we need to, I'd like to kind of clean up the where the leaf touches, those. So I'm going to go back with some of the darker some of this darker color here. Too much water. And So at this point you can take some darker color around the edges of the leaves, depending on how fussy you want to be, and emphasize those torn or tattered or jagged leaf edges, and then blend that into the bottom leaf so they're shadows, that sort of thing. You can also take either a flat or almost a dry brush here. Emphasize those a little bit. We can get some of these over here too. And some of these in here can be done that way. I wouldn't do too much detail personally. You got a nest now, which is what I was going for. Finally, I've got a nest. Like I say, I'll go ahead and put some darker. I'll probably mix a little sepia and ultramarine and get some darks in here. That's too dark. See how you do that? I'm not going to do much more of this. People that really like to do the detail work, why don't you come over to my house? No, I like to get the general look and not do too much detail, but usually if you do a few details, people get the picture. What they say in the classes and so on is that you just basically hint some of the texture, some of the detail, like some of the fur on the cat or whatever, and you don't have to do every single hair, just suggest it in a few places. Okay, what we have left is those lovely grapes, and I want to be careful with the color of those. Keep them light and not very dominant at all. You can take a flat if you're comfortable with flats, and clean up my palette a little bit here. You can take a flat and go around with it, kind of go around like this with it. It's a sign painter's trick. And in fact, with many of these, given the green pencil on the outside edge, you could almost paint the whole grape using that little bit of colored pencil color. On the lighter grapes, that would work just fine. It may or may not be okay with leaving the colored pencil showing. Everyone's different. But I'm going to use a little bit of that mixture of cerulean and Hansa to kind of go at the bottom of the grape to emphasize that it's round. It's shape, mostly. If they're down in the shadow like this one, it doesn't hurt if some of that, you might get more blue than yellow there. And this one, same thing. Each grape's different. Paint them each individually. Enjoy it. It's kind of laborious, but you'll like it when it's finished. Now there, I've got some graphite pencil I failed to pick up. Failed to erase, so I'm going to make that grape a little bit darker so it kind of camouflages it. Sometimes the wetness picks up a pencil line a little bit too. These grapes here are just the green grapes. I think they're wild grapes probably. At least we used to have a vine just about like this near to us in the house I used to live in. And they didn't have purple grapes, they had these little white ones. But sometimes they get a little bit of purple in them or a little bit of pink. If you really want to, you could add, I would say, a touch of the burnt orange. Maybe this one can have a little bit of pink in it. Just a little bit. Just for variety. See, we've already got the orange here, so it's not going to stand out very much because it's not the only spot of red on the page. You can add a little more yellow to it if you want. Or you can just get it painted and then pick up where the sun hits it. Each one's different, so try something different in each one if you want. So if you take your paper towel, I've got a slightly damp paper towel, just lift a little bit on these. They'll look as though the sun's hit them. Now these are behind the grapevine, so they will probably be a little darker. Of course, the opposite of green, if you want shade, is red, so you could put, if you're really daring and want to play with color, you could put which I wouldn't recommend if this is a successful painting at this point. I do it all the time, but I'd like for you to leave with a successful painting. But if your painting is already kind of, go ahead and play with things and see what happens when you add some red in for shading, for shadowing. As long as you keep it wet and pick it up before it, looks like something you don't want, it should be fine. I kind of like these just the way they are with the colored pencil line, but colored watercolor pencils are not really traditional. Some shows don't accept them as watercolor media at this point. They would be considered mixed media. And I do like to enter juried shows. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, now I think maybe I want to throw a little bit of this light color up in this corner. I can find my brush. This will do it, I guess. Just go over this leaf a little bit. This one I could add some vein lines to. It's all dry now. Take my smaller brush, get a little, almost any color in there. Just a quick. Gotta have some water too. Just something, just a quick little hint. And as far as I'm concerned, this is successful and it's finished, and I could sign my name to it. But you need to develop your own opinion and critique your own work. If you think it's not finished, you would have trouble living with it, and go ahead and do more on it. But try not to do too much correcting. You're almost better off starting with a new painting than doing too much correcting. If you're really down on the painting, you don't like it at all, put it away. Next week, take it out again, see if you like it a little bit better, or at least at that point you can decide what it is that's wrong with it, and whether to try and fix it and experiment a little bit more by fixing it, or start over, or forget the whole thing. So this is my third and final try at Bird's Nest in the Grapevine.